Like many music festivals, Glastonbury is an opportunity to imagine different forms of living. Just for a few days, people elevate personal relationships, art, and friendship above the rat race of work. For some, that's a break from the norm. For others, it can trigger a change in how they engage with the world. And Glastonbury management certainly take their responsibilities seriously when it comes to climate change. Here's the energy policy on the festival website. Global climate change continues to present the biggest threat to our planet. Here at Glastonbury Festival, we are committed to reducing greenhouse gas emissions and using clean energy sources whenever possible. That page proceeds to explain precisely how the festival has sought to minimise its carbon footprint as much as possible, and this is really, really impressive. In 2023, all of Glastonbury Festival's power will be met by renewable energy and renewable fuels. All generators across the festival site, including those that power the pyramid stage, will run on sustainable, renewable, palm oil-free HVO fuel. That's hydrogenated vegetable oil made from waste cooking oil, helping to reduce life cycle CO2 emissions by up to 90%. All production areas will either be powered by low-impact fossil fuel-free electricity or will run on solar PV and battery hybrid systems. There's more. A temporary wind turbine installed alongside a solar panel and battery system will produce up to 300 kilowatt of energy per day and power food stalls in Williams Green. Clean energy from the festival's own 200 kilowatts per hour, I think it is, solar PV array, as well as our anaerobic digester and 125 kilovolts biogas plant power. You tell me, sounds impressive. Provide energy for festival offices and some production areas, as well as helping to charge some battery systems. In order to reduce our on-site emissions, a small fleet of electric vehicles will be used to transport artists around the site to their performances. Seriously impressive stuff. And by the way, there was a lot more that we've not included because that would have just taken 5 minutes. A Glastonbury Festival on this issue in particular have really put their money where their mouth is. And yet, despite all these measures, attendees at the festival would have seen various helicopters flying overhead. One of those included Elton John. Now, I don't support the use of helicopters as a private form of transport, but Mr. John is in his 70s and this was his last ever UK concert. If you're going to make an exception for anyone, it's him. But not everybody travelling by chopper was a pop music icon, and it's hard to see why they couldn't travel by car, train, or taxi. One such person was Holly Willoughby, presenter on This Morning and former bestie of Philip Schofield. Miss Willoughby and her husband arrived at the festival via helicopter from Battersea. This is absurd, not least because the train from London Paddington to Castle Carey is 1 hour and 45 minutes. Where I'm from, in Bournemouth, which is much closer to Somerset, that journey is 2.5 hours. But London's rail privilege, and yes, that's a thing, was lost on Willoughby, who went to a festival embracing a post-carbon agenda in the ultimate gas guzzler. This is all the more bizarre since Willoughby herself said in 2020 that the climate crisis was impacting the mental health of her 3 children. Back then, she was speaking to 2 climate activists, Pippa Best and Ellie Smith, who described how thinking about climate change had given them anxiety and chest pains. Here's what Willoughby said at the time. I've got my 3 children, they watch Newsround. It's something that's part of school and they watch it. They come home and more recently I noticed they talk about it a lot. We've always been quite environmental in our home, as much as we can, but they're talking about it in a different way now, the same as what you've seen with the bushfires, all sorts of things. And they do worry about it. Their questioning has changed. Actually, it's become quite fearful. And I'm wondering, as a parent, how do we deal with that? Because it's not just affecting adults, it's affecting our children too. As a parent, how can I deal with climate change? Holly, start by not getting a helicopter to a festival when the train can get you there in under 2 hours. Just a thought. Now, the headlines this stuff generates undermines so much good work that people like Glastonbury Festival do, who are clearly very serious about the climate crisis. And this is worst of all, it allows the right-wing press to present people who care about climate change as hypocrites, when in reality, they're talking about a tiny minority of millionaire celebrities. But not all millionaire celebrities, I should add. Compare Willoughby's chosen mode of transport to rock god Dave Grohl. He didn't just take the train to Glastonbury, he also posed for a selfie with a rail worker. That's what an icon looks like. Moya, am I being unfair? Should celebrities be allowed the occasional helicopter ride as a little treat?
Actually, I was the one in the private helicopter. No, obviously, I don't think that celebrities should be allowed a little helicopter ride as a treat. Private jet use and helicopter use is actually one of the is this form of transport is the most polluting form of transport you can take. And the interesting thing about private jet use is that it's going up. It's increased, and that is in direct proportion to our public transport's reliability decreasing. If you look at the UK, for example, the UK is the biggest private jet and helicopter polluter in Europe. I think it's responsible for something like 20% of emissions. And in Europe, private jet and helicopter usage has doubled in the last 3 years. There's a specific reason. You look at our prime minister who opts to take, I think, private jets 1 week. He took 3 in a week. There's all these headlines constantly about Rishi Sunak taking what would be an hour journey on a train via private jet. And then you look at the train services. It's very obvious that as train services or bus services are crumbling under nationalised but actually franchised out contracts that are not providing the services they should be doing, cancelled trains, tickets are not available, something like a Vanti where you can only buy tickets 3 days ahead, and there's this mad scramble, almost the same with Glastonbury tickets. Why am I having to buy tickets for a Vanti in the same manner I would do for a festival like Glastonbury? It makes absolutely no sense. When you look at what train travel has been reduced to in this country, which is unreliable, inconsistent, and faced with massive delays where it won't get you on time, the super rich, of course, are choosing to do what they can do, which is take very fast private transport. They don't give a toss if it's polluting because they've argued to themselves that it's necessary in order to meet their needs at that point in time. Someone like Holly Willoughby can sit there. There's a reason she has the cognitive dissonance where she can sit there and say, the climate crisis is impacting the mental health of my children. And as a parent, I really want to do something. And also see no problem with taking a private helicopter to Glastonbury when she thinks the train will, either be cancelled, delayed, not get there on time. When I was coming back from Glastonbury, where I was representing Novara Media, the trains that I was on, they were all over the place. 2 trains that were delayed. There was one that they managed to divert to come to Castle Quarry to pick us up. I didn't mind what time I got home. I'm not a rich person. It was fine. I was going to be taking the tube. I knew this was something I had to do anyway. But for somebody who could say, fuck it, actually, I'm going to get the helicopter and skip all this, you can see why when they have massive amounts of wealth, they would. The rich are getting richer. There are people who are still shielded from this crisis, the people who've profited the most. It's not, the middle classes who are getting those helicopters. It's the super rich. It's the sons and daughters of the oil and gas giants. It's the billionaires who've made loads of money speculating on grain prices after the war in Ukraine. It's these people who are traveling. And there's a reason why the Harrods general manager, or whatever his official title is, says that, in a recession, the rich spend more because they actually have more money because they're profiteering off all of us getting poorer. And when we can't do anything to control prices, this helicopter issue is not separate from everything else we've talked about to do with economics in this show. And the one thing that it is doing is speeding us ever closer towards a climate crisis, which is why, in order to tackle a climate crisis, you have to make it so that infrastructure like public transport, etc., is so top-notch and so sustainable that people are not going to want to take the other option. Unfortunately, we can't preach rich people into not doing this, because if the alternative is somehow less efficient, more inconsistent, morality goes away. We've talked about that too. You can't rely on morality alone to make people choose the correct or the option that is better for the greater good. You have to actually provide the greater good, the alternative for them to pick. You have to make public transport so good they don't need to take a helicopter, or don't think they need to take a helicopter. They don't have another choice. They can't say that this is better than this one because the trains are actually running on time and they're clean and they're sustainable. So this all links together. These are not separate issues.
I kind of disagree a bit more, because even if you had TGV, high speed, but a helicopter is always going to be quicker than a train, right? It is clearly more convenient but for one person. The point is we can't all do it. The main issue for me is I find it bizarre that somebody can say that the climate crisis is impacting the mental health of my 3 children and get a helicopter somewhere. I find it crazy. She could drive there, right? I'm not suggesting you can drive there. You could have a chauffeur-driven car there, air-conditioned. You can work in the back. You can do all sorts of things. I think that the helicopter to me it's actually quite unusual within a British context. It's just like, it's gratuitously wealthy and obscene, and like it's conspicuous consumption we generally associate with the US. And the reason why it's really struck me here is because you have this incredible dissonance between what Holly Willoughby's done, which I'm sure she's done before, right? I'm sure it's not the first time, and what this festival is doing. And I am really angry about this because you've got right-wing, shock jocks and commentators piling on Glastonbury saying, oh, it's all woke virtue signaling. They're not really serious about the climate crisis. Actually, they bloody well are, because we've just listed the infrastructure they've built to reduce their carbon footprint. But that's ridden roughshod over by people like Holly Willoughby because she wants the most convenient way of getting there. I frankly think what would be great if anybody, connected to the senior management at Glastonbury, is watching, to ban this. Say, look, if you come to the site by helicopter, she arrived there, by the way, she wasn't coming back, she went there by helicopter. If you arrive by helicopter, you cannot enter, because frankly, for me, it completely undermines and discredits all the good work that they're doing. Maybe we'll make an exception for Elton John. Your final thought, Moya?
You look somewhere like Sweden, everyone takes the train. Doesn't matter your level of wealth. The train is like the main form of transport there because it has been baked into the public consciousness that this is the reliable, the best way to travel. And I think, again, as I've said, the reason that we're aping America is because our public transport system is crumbling in the same way the American one is, and celebrities are not going to, unfortunately, take the National Express all the way to Glastonbury. They just won't. The option is rail travel. That is the main thing, or driving. But I would say we don't want to encourage driving. So we need to make the rail system the fastest, most brilliant thing possible.